A clash of titans, Sparta vs. Persia. The Spartans were one of the most feared and respected militaries in the ancient world. But how did they get that way? Let's find out. Hey guys, it's me. And today, we are going to be talking about the Spartans again. We've talked about them quite a few times before on this channel, because their military is so amazing. But today we are going to talk about the truth behind the movie 300. Because while the movie is amazing, and Gerard Butler is an amazing King Leonidas, it's not completely true. So let's jump into it. Spartan valor versus Persian might. The Spartans were sent by their overlord, the Athenians, to defend Greece against the massive invading Persian army, led by King Xerxès. He was hot on the trail of the Greek city-states. They had already burned Athens to the ground, and if the Spartans didn't stop him, he would take all of Greece. But they weren't just going to hand the Spartans victory on a silver platter. They fought tooth and nail, but the Spartans were up for the task. They were sent to the hot and narrow pass of Thermopylae. It was almost like the Spartans were walking into a trap. But the Spartans and their allies stood firm as the Persians attacked. Wave after wave they came, but none could break the Spartans' lines. But why? Why were the Spartans able to stand against such a huge army? And what did the Persians do when they realized they couldn't win? Let's find out. The Spartans were warriors. That's all they knew and all they loved. Every male was trained in combat from the time they were toddlers. Their fathers would bring them to the Agoge, or military training academy, and leave them there to be trained by the state until they were adults. If they were accepted, that is. Many boys were sent back home because they simply weren't cut out for life as a Spartan. This made the Spartans very efficient, but also led to many losses when they went into battle. The Spartan army at Thermopylae consisted of only 7,000 men, but that wasn't even the entire force. It was just a portion of the Spartan army that was sent to assist the other Greeks at Thermopylae. This meant that most of the elite Spartan hoplites were still back in Sparta. So with fewer men, they needed to make every one count. And they did. The Spartans were known for their superior tactics and their discipline. In every engagement, they showed the Persians who was boss. For 2 days, they held off the entire Persian army. They killed thousands upon thousands of Persians, but the end seemed to be near. You see, the Spartan numbers were dwindling, but their supplies were also running low. If they couldn't hold out any longer, then they would be forced to flee. And with no supplies, the Spartan army would be vulnerable to attack. They needed more supplies, but how were they going to get them when the Persian army outnumbered them so badly? Did they get reinforcements, or did they do something else? Find out next. But first I need some help. Please hit that subscribe button down below for me. I'm trying to reach a milestone before my 3-year anniversary here on YouTube, and you can help me do that. But anyway, let's get back to it. As the second day of fighting drew to a close, the Spartan king Leonidas knew that his men were exhausted. With only 7,000 men, he couldn't afford to let them burn out. So he ordered them back to their camp for the night. He hoped that maybe during the night he could negotiate with the Persian king and buy some time for his men to recover. He sent out a group of messengers to the other Greek city-states, calling for more men to come to Thermopylae. But these messengers would never arrive. You see, Xerxès wasn't going to let the Spartans live. While they were sleeping, he unleashed his deadliest weapon, his spies. The spies snuck into the camp and assassinated several Spartan officers. Then they set fire to the camp, hoping to flush the Spartans out and kill them. But Leonidas wasn't having it. He rallied the men and led them out to fight another day. But he had no idea what was in store for him. As dawn broke, the Spartans were ready to fight again. They knew that they might die, but they weren't backing down. But what happened next shocked them. The Persian army wasn't there. Instead, there was a messenger holding out a white flag. The Spartans were suspicious, but Leonidas accepted the offer to meet with the Persian king. When they arrived, they found out why. Xerxès had offered them a deal. He wanted Leonidas and his men to surrender and join the Persians. In return, their lives would be spared, but Leonidas refused. He told Xerxès that the Spartans would never surrender, and he should know it by now. Xerxès was furious. He thought that he could scare the Spartans into surrendering, but he was wrong. Leonidas wasn't afraid of him. He knew that his men would fight to the death, and that's exactly what happened. The Spartans fought with everything they had. But as the hours passed, their numbers dwindled, but they still stood strong. But Xerxes wouldn't allow this to continue. He wanted the Spartans dead, and nothing would stop him. That's when he unleashed his secret weapon, the Immortals. These were a special group of soldiers whose job was to hunt down Leonidas and his men. They were fast and deadly, and they were relentless. Soon, the Spartans were surrounded, and their fate looked grim. But they still fought on. Leonidas knew that he couldn't beat the Immortals, so he had a plan. He ordered his men to feign a retreat. The Immortals took the bait and chased after them. When they were far enough away, Leonidas turned and charged. His men followed, and soon the Immortals were dead. But this didn't last long. Soon the Persian army arrived, and the Spartans knew that they were outnumbered. There was only one thing left to do. They stood back to back in a circle and charged into the fray. They fought like animals, but they knew that it was only a matter of time before they died. As the sun began to set, the Spartans were surrounded by the bodies of their enemies. They had fought bravely, but they were exhausted. Xerxes approached them and offered them the same deal again. But Leonidas refused. He told Xerxes that the Spartans would never surrender, not even when they were outnumbered 10-1, and that's when the Spartans made their final stand. They fought until the last man, and when they died with honor. But that doesn't mean the Spartans won. The Spartans lost the Battle of Thermopylae, but they won the war. You see, while the Spartans were fighting the Persians, the other Greeks were preparing for battle. When they heard about the Spartans' plight, they knew that they had to act fast. They sent ships to rescue the Spartans, and they fought the Persians back. The Greeks won the war, but it could have been much worse if it hadn't been for the Spartans. The Spartans were heroes, and their bravery will never be forgotten. But what did the Persians do after the Spartans were defeated? You'll find out next.
Ow.
So the Spartans put up a good fight, but in the end they lost. But what happens next may surprise you. After the Spartans were defeated, the Persians didn't just go home. They kept marching forward and took over Greece. But they didn't stay for long. They knew that the Greeks would come after them, and they didn't want to risk being ambushed.
Ow.
So they retreated back to Persia, and that's where the story of 300 ends. But what really happened after the Spartans were defeated? That's a story for another day. Thanks for watching.